You're watching a segment on the brutal Israeli assault on Gaza as the Palestinian death toll mounts. The anchor mentions they have a guest or an analyst to discuss the loss of Palestinian civilian life. Who are you expecting to see? Are you expecting to see a human rights lawyer, a UN worker, maybe an actual Palestinian? Or are you expecting this?
Joining us now is Israeli government spokesperson Ilan Levy.
Joining me now, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus,
spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces.
I've been speaking to the Israeli government spokesperson, Mark Regev.
Joining me now is Shahar Azani, former Israeli diplomat and spokesperson for the Israeli consulate.
We are now joined by Ophir Falk. He's a foreign policy advisor to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
A key feature of Western reporting on Palestinians is who is allowed to tell the story of Palestinians, both the history of the occupation as well as real-time atrocities being committed by the Israeli state. Reporting is as much about who is telling the story as much as it is about the what, where, and when of it all. What we find again and again with the reporting on the Israeli occupation of Palestinians and the recent Israeli campaign of genocide in Gaza is that the sources used to comment on, analyze, and discuss things are rarely Palestinians themselves. Instead, we find that time and time again, it's Israeli voices, specifically Israeli government and military voices, and voices sympathetic to Israeli and American policies who are presented as authoritative and rational analysts in coverage. This is the case in the papers, and it's also the case in broadcast too. This is not to say that we never see Palestinians or those who criticize Israeli policies in coverage, but these aren't voices and perspectives that lead coverage. In fact, they're nowhere near leading the coverage. According to a 2020 study done by Dr. Maha Nassar, less than 2% of the almost 2,500 opinion pieces about Palestinians in the New York Times written between 1970 and 2019 were by Palestinians. For the Washington Post, during that same time period, only 1% of the over 3,000 opinion pieces about Palestinians were written by Palestinians. It's a pattern that we see throughout print, broadcast, and even audio. Palestinians featured in news coverage about themselves, their history, the atrocities their people are facing are exceptions, not the norm. And so what ends up happening is that both Israeli and American interests are upheld. Their aggression against the Palestinians is obscured, and any claims that Palestinians have, including just being able to be alive and safe, are at best dismissed and, at worst, used for justification for further violence against them. Take, for example, how the U.S. news media has spent months discussing the atmosphere on U.S. campuses and how pro-Israel students in particular have felt unsafe with chants for a, quote, free Palestine or for a ceasefire. Even while campuses were shutting down student groups, organizing demands for a ceasefire, while 3 Arab students were shot for wearing keffiyehs and speaking Arabic in public, while students were being threatened by billionaires and their own professors for advocating for Palestinians, the news coverage focused overwhelmingly on pro-Israel students' discomfort, who compared calls for a free Palestine to calls for genocide against Jewish people.